The hardest part wasn't writing that Tommy Walsh was dead. It was deciding what to leave out. Should Frank Morrison tell Sarah Walsh that Tommy had carried her photograph in his helmet, that he talked about her constantly, planned their whole future together, named their children even though they didn't have any yet? Should Frank mention that Tommy had volunteered for the patrol that killed him because Frank was sick with dysentery and Tommy didn't want him going out? Should Frank explain that Tommy's last coherent words were, "Tell Sarah I tried"? Should he describe how Tommy had taken 7 minutes to die from a stomach wound, how he'd screamed for his mother, how Frank had held his hand and lied that he'd be okay? Or should Frank write the kind letter, the merciful letter, the letter that said Tommy died instantly, felt no pain, thought of Sarah at the end? Frank sat in the chaplain's office on September 2, 1968, with a blank piece of paper and an impossible choice: tell the truth and give Sarah nightmares for the rest of her life, or lie and carry the weight of that lie alone forever. In the end, Frank wrote a letter that said everything and nothing, because some truths are too heavy to put in writing, and some lies are the only kindness left to give. August 27, 1968, Firebase Coral, morning. Frank Morrison woke up feeling like death. Not metaphorical death, actual, physical, intestinal death. Dysentery had hit him 3 days ago, and he'd spent most of that time either in the latrine or wishing he was. He'd lost 10 pounds, couldn't keep food down, could barely keep water down. The base medic had grounded him from patrol duty until his system stabilized. Morrison. Tommy Walsh appeared in the tent opening, already in full combat gear. "You look like hell, mate." "Feel worse," Frank managed, sitting up slowly. "The world spun. Good thing you're staying back then." Walsh adjusted his webbing, checked his rifle for the 5th time. "Should be an easy patrol. Routine sweep near the village. Back by 1400 hours. Frank noticed Walsh's nervous energy, the way he kept touching his gear, checking and rechecking. "You okay?" Frank asked. "Yeah, just, I don't know, bad feeling about today." Walsh forced a smile. "Probably nothing, just the humidity messing with my head." "Then don't go. Tell Collins you're sick too." "Can't, we're already undermanned with you out, someone's got to cover your section." Walsh pulled out his wallet, showed Frank a photograph. Sarah Walsh, pretty girl with dark hair and a bright smile. "Look what came yesterday. New photo. She sent it for my birthday next week. She's beautiful." "Yeah." Walsh stared at the photo like he was trying to memorize it. "We're getting married when I get home. Already picked out a house in Brisbane, near her parents. Got a job lined up at the docks. Whole life planned out. Sounds perfect." "It will be. Just gotta survive another 4 months." Walsh tucked the photo back in his wallet, then pulled it out again and looked at it one more time. "Frank, if something happens, nothing's going to happen. But if it does, tell Sarah. Tell her I tried. Tell her I did my best. Tommy, promise me." Frank looked at his best friend, the guy who'd shared his tent for 8 months, who'd kept Frank sane through long tan, who'd covered for Frank when he was too scared to eat, who'd become the brother Frank never had. "Nothing's going to happen," Frank repeated. "You're going to come back. We're going to play cards tonight, and you're going to show me that photo 50 more times." Walsh smiled. "Yeah, you're right, I'm being stupid. You're being careful. There's a difference." "Hey Morrison!" Sergeant Collins shouted from outside. "Walsh, we're moving in 5. Walsh gave Frank a final look. "Try to get some rest, and stay out of the latrine long enough to eat something. Be safe out there." "Always am." Tommy Walsh walked out of the tent. Frank watched him go, adjusting his helmet, joining the other soldiers forming up for patrol. It was the last time Frank saw him alive. August 27, 1968, Firebase Coral, 14:37 hours. Frank heard the helicopter before he saw it. Dust off. Medical evacuation. Coming in fast and unscheduled. He was in the mess tent trying to force down some rice when the Huey appeared over the tree line, rotor wash sending dust and debris everywhere. It landed hard, and medics were already running toward it with stretchers. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Frank stood up, rice forgotten, walking toward the landing zone. His stomach was churning, but not from dysentery anymore. The helicopter's side door slid open. 3 body bags came out first. Then the wounded. 4 stretchers. Men covered in blood, medics working frantically. IV bags swinging. Frank saw Corporal Bennett from Walsh's squad, conscious but holding his arm at a wrong angle. "Bennett, what happened?" Bennett looked at Frank with hollow eyes. "Ambush. They were waiting for us. We walked right into it." "Where's Walsh?" Bennett didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Just shook his head and looked away. "Bennett, where's Tommy?" But Frank already knew. He could see it in Bennett's face, could see it in the way the medics were moving, could count the body bags. 1, 2, 3. Sergeant Collins appeared, face grim, uniform covered in someone else's blood. He saw Frank and stopped. "Morrison. No, son. I need you to— No, not Tommy. Not— He took point when we hit the ambush, bought us time to fall back. He's the reason anyone made it out." Collins's voice cracked. "He died doing his job, died saving his squad." Frank felt his legs give out. Collins caught him, held him up. "Where is he?" Collins gestured toward the third body bag. Black rubber, zipped closed, tagged with a name Frank couldn't bear to read. "He asked for you," Collins said quietly. "At the end. Kept saying your name. Kept saying tell Frank, tell Sarah." "Tell them what?" "That he tried." "That's what he said. Tell them I tried." Collins released Frank, stepped back. "We'll have a service tomorrow. You don't have to speak if you don't want to." "I want to see him." "Morrison, I don't think. I want to see him." Collins was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "Give me 5 minutes. I'll make sure he's presentable." Frank stood there in the red dust of Firebase Coral, watching medics work on the wounded, watching chaplains move toward the body bags, watching his entire world tilt sideways and refuse to right itself. Tommy Walsh was dead. His best friend. His tent mate. His brother. Dead at 20 years old because he'd volunteered for a patrol that should have been Frank's. Dead because Frank had been too sick to do his job. Dead because someone had to cover Frank's section. The guilt hit Frank like a physical blow. He dropped to his knees and vomited into the red dirt. Not from dysentery, from the knowledge that Tommy Walsh had died in his place. August 28, 1968. Firebase Coral. Memorial service. They held the service at 0900 hours. 3 coffins draped with Australian flags. 40 soldiers in dress uniforms standing in the heat. A chaplain reading from a book that felt meaningless. Frank stood in the front row, staring at Tommy's coffin, barely hearing the words. Private Thomas Walsh, age 20, of Brisbane, Queensland. Frank had seen Tommy before the service. Collins had kept his word, made sure he was presentable, which meant they'd cleaned the blood, closed the wounds as best they could, arranged him peacefully. But Frank could still see where the bullets had hit, could still imagine the 7 minutes it took Tommy to die, could still hear Bennett describing it. He was calling for his mom, then for Sarah, then for you, kept saying, "Tell Frank, tell Sarah, tell them I tried," over and over until he couldn't talk anymore. Survived by his wife Sarah Walsh, and his parents John and Elizabeth Walsh of Brisbane. Sarah, Tommy's wife, except they weren't married yet, weren't even engaged officially, though Tommy had bought a ring and planned to propose on leave next month. Sarah Walsh, who thought her fiancé was coming home in 4 months, who didn't know yet that her entire future had died in a Vietnamese jungle. Who would receive the official telegram first? Cold, bureaucratic, insufficient. Someone had to write her a real letter. Someone who knew Tommy. Someone who'd been there, gave his life in service to his country and his mates. The chaplain finished. Taps played. 3 rifle volleys cracked across the firebase. The Australian flag was folded with military precision and handed to Collins, who would mail it to Tommy's parents. Frank stood at attention, tears running down his face, hands shaking. After the service, Collins pulled Frank aside. "Morrison, I know this is hard, but someone needs to write to Sarah Walsh. Personal letter, not just the official notification. Family appreciates hearing from the friends who were there." Collins paused. "You were his best mate. It should be you." "I don't know if I can. Neither did I the first time I had to do it, but you do it anyway, because it matters, because she deserves to hear from someone who knew him." Collins put a hand on Frank's shoulder. "Take your time. Write what you think she needs to hear. Chaplain can help if you need it." Frank nodded, not trusting himself to speak. That afternoon they processed Tommy's belongings. Everything a soldier owned, reduced to 1 footlocker, uniforms, books, letters from home, photographs, and in Tommy's helmet, tucked behind the webbing, Sarah's photograph, the one he'd shown Frank the morning he died, the one he'd looked at like he was trying to memorize her face. Frank took the photograph. He'd return it to Sarah, along with the letter he still didn't know how to write. September 1st, 1968, fearing Saddler's Fist. Evening, Frank sat at the chaplain's small desk with a pen, paper, and no words. He'd been sitting there for 40 minutes, had 3 crumpled attempts in the wastebasket, couldn't get past the first line. How do you start? "Dear Sarah, your fiancé is dead?" The chaplain, Father Murphy, kind-eyed, Irish, maybe 40, sat across from him. "Sometimes," Murphy said gently, "the hardest letters are the most important ones." "I don't know what to say," Frank admitted. "Every time I try, it comes out wrong. Too honest or not honest enough." "What's too honest?" "Telling her he suffered, that he was scared, that he screamed, that it took 7 minutes." Frank stared at the blank page. She doesn't need to know that. What's not honest enough? Telling her he died instantly, that he didn't feel anything, that he went peacefully. Frank looked up, because that's not true either. Murphy was quiet for a moment. What did Tommy want her to know? He said, "Tell Sarah I tried. That's all. Tell Sarah I tried." Then tell her that. But what does it mean? Tried what? Tried to survive? Tried to come home? Tried to be the man she wanted? Frank's voice broke. How do I know what he meant? You don't, but Sarah will, because she knew him in ways you didn't. She'll understand what he was trying to say. Frank picked up the pen, put it down again. Father, can I ask you something? Of course. Tommy died on my patrol. He volunteered because I was sick. If I'd been there, he'd still be dead. Different person, same ambush. Murphy leaned forward. Morrison, I've been a chaplain for 12 years. I've written more condolence letters than I can count, and every single time someone feels guilty, the mate who survived, the sergeant who assigned the patrol, the officer who approved the mission, everyone carries guilt for the dead. But Tommy took my place. Tommy did his job. You were sick. There's no guilt in that, only tragedy. Murphy paused. The question isn't should he have died instead of me. The question is, what do I do with the life I still have? How do you honor his sacrifice? Frank stared at the blank page. Then finally, he started to write. September 2nd, 1968. Chaplain's office. Morning. Frank had been writing for 12 hours. He'd written 17 versions of the letter. Started over each time. Tried different approaches. Formal, casual, detailed, vague, honest, merciful. None of them felt right. Version 18 sat in front of him now. The one he thought he might actually send. He read it back to himself. Dear Sarah, my name is Frank Morrison. I don't know if Tommy ever mentioned me, but I was his tent mate and best friend here in Vietnam. I'm writing to you because the official telegram can't tell you what you deserve to know about who Tommy was and what he meant to all of us. Tommy talked about you constantly. Every day. He carried your photograph in his helmet and looked at it before every patrol like it was a prayer. He had your whole future planned. The house in Brisbane, the job at the docks, the children you'd have together. He knew their names already. Michael for a boy, Elizabeth for a girl. He said Elizabeth was your mother's name, and he wanted to honor her. On August 27th, Tommy volunteered for a patrol that should have been mine. I was sick, and the squad was undermanned. Tommy didn't hesitate. He took point position because that's who he was, someone who stepped up when it mattered. The patrol was ambushed. Tommy's actions bought time for his squad mates to fall back and regroup. Several men are alive today because of his courage. He was wounded during the engagement, but he held his position until the squad was secure. In his final moments, Tommy asked me to tell you something. He said, "Tell Sarah I tried." I don't know exactly what he meant by that. I think maybe he meant he tried to come home to you, tried to be the man you deserved, tried to survive long enough to build that life you'd planned together. Whatever he meant, I know this. Tommy Walsh loved you more than anything in this world. You were his reason for getting through each day. You were his hope and his future and his home. I'm enclosing the photograph you sent him. He looked at it the morning he died. He looked at it like he was trying to memorize your face. I thought you should have it back. I'm sorry this letter can't bring him back. I'm sorry for your loss and for the future you should have had together. If there's anything I can do, or if you want to know more about Tommy's time here, please write to me. I will always remember him as a brother. With deepest sympathy, Private Frank Morrison, 7RR Car, Firebase Coral. Frank set down the pen, stared at the letter. It was a lie, or at least it wasn't the complete truth. He hadn't mentioned the screaming, hadn't mentioned the 7 minutes of agony. September 15th, 1968, Firebase Coral, afternoon. The letter arrived 2 weeks later. Frank was cleaning his rifle when the mail call came. He wasn't expecting anything. Margaret wrote regularly, but he'd gotten her letter yesterday. Morrison, you got mail. The envelope was from Brisbane. Return address, S. Walsh. Frank's hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a single page, written in neat handwriting. Nina's, Dear Frank, thank you for your letter. It arrived yesterday, and I have read it 50 times already. The official telegram told me that Tommy was dead, but your letter told me who he was when he died. That matters more than you know. You're right that Tommy mentioned you often. His letters home were full of stories about Frank, the mate who kept him sane, who played cards with him, who understood what it meant to be scared and brave at the same time. He said you saved his life at Long Tan. He said you were the brother he never had. I want you to know something. Tommy didn't take your place on that patrol. He took his own place. That's who he was. He would have gone regardless of who was sick or healthy. It's what he signed up to do. You are not responsible for his death. Please hear that. Tommy made his own choice. Honor that choice by living your life fully. Come home, marry your Margaret, build the future that Tommy wanted for us both. I'm enclosing a photograph. It's from our last day together before he deployed. I want you to have it, so you can remember him happy and whole and full of life. That's the Tommy I'm choosing to remember. That's the Tommy I hope you'll remember too. The photograph you returned meant everything to me. Thank you for making sure it came home. I don't know if we'll ever meet, Frank, but if we do, I'll shake your hand and thank you for being Tommy's friend, for keeping part of him alive through your memories, for writing this letter when it would have been easier to stay silent. You gave me a gift. You told me that Tommy's last thoughts were of me, of us, of the life we'd planned. That helps, more than you can imagine. Please be safe. Please come home. Please live the life that Tommy wanted for you. With gratitude and respect, Sarah Walsh. Frank read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and placed it in his footlocker next to Margaret's letters. Sarah had enclosed a photograph as promised. Tommy and Sarah at a beach somewhere, arms around each other, both smiling like they had the whole world figured out. Tommy looked younger than Frank remembered, happier, more alive. Frank stared at that photograph for a long time. Then he took out paper and pen and started writing to Margaret. Dear Margaret, I need to tell you something I haven't been able to say before. My best friend Tommy died 3 weeks ago. I've been carrying that like a weight I can't put down. But his fiancée wrote to me today, and she said something that helped. She said Tommy made his own choice, and I should honor that choice by living my life fully. So I'm writing to tell you that I love you, that I'm coming home, that I want to marry you and build the life we've talked about. No more delays, no more waiting. When my tour ends in December, I'm coming straight home to you, and I'm never leaving again. I promise. Frank sealed the letter, handed both letters to the mail clerk, and for the first time in 3 weeks, he felt like he could breathe again. September 28, 1968, Firebase Coral, evening. Frank kept both photographs on his bunk. Sarah and Tommy at the beach. Margaret in Melbourne. 2 futures. One lost, one waiting. He looked at them every night before sleep, reminded himself why he was fighting, why he needed to survive, why he had to come home. Tommy Walsh had died trying to get home to Sarah. Frank Morrison was going to make it, for both of them. The guilt hadn't disappeared, probably never would, but it had transformed into something else. Purpose. Tommy's death wasn't meaningless. It had saved his squad. It had taught Frank what sacrifice looked like. It had reminded Frank that every day alive was a gift that should be honored, not wasted. One evening, Sergeant Collins found Frank at Tommy's grave marker, a simple cross with a dog tag, temporary until they could arrange proper repatriation. How you holding up, Morrison? Better. Some days. Frank traced Tommy's name on the marker. Sarah wrote back. She thanked me for the letter. That's good. Means you wrote the right things. Did I? I left out so much. The pain, the fear, the screaming. You left out the things that would haunt her forever. You kept the things that would help her heal. Colin sat down beside Frank. That's the right call. Every time. I'll never forget what really happened. No, you won't. That's your burden to carry now. And that's okay. That's part of surviving. Colin stood. But Frank, don't just survive. Live. That's what Tommy would want. That's what you owe him. Frank nodded. I'm going home in December. Going to marry Margaret. Going to have that life Tommy wanted. Good. That's real good. Colin started to walk away, then turned back. Hey Morrison, you did right by Walsh, writing that letter, helping his girl cope. That took courage. Different kind than combat, but courage all the same. After Collins left, Frank sat alone with the dead. I miss you, mate, he said to the cross. Miss the cards and the cigarettes and the stupid jokes. Miss having someone who got it. The cross didn't answer. Dead men don't. But Frank felt something shift anyway. Not closure. He'd never have that. But maybe acceptance. Maybe peace. Tommy Walsh had died at 20 years old in a war that wouldn't be won. But he died protecting his friends. Died with courage. Died trying. That had to count for something. Frank stood, brushed dirt from his uniform, and walked back toward the living. He had 3 more months in Vietnam. Then he was going home to Margaret. Going to build that life. Going to live fully and well and without regret. For Tommy. For Sarah. For himself. Some promises you make to the dead, and those are the ones you keep forever. Epilogue, December 1970. Frank Morrison came home to Melbourne on December 18, 1970. Margaret met him at the airport, and they were married 6 weeks later. They had 2 children, a son named Thomas and a daughter named Elizabeth. Frank never told Margaret why he'd chosen those names. But sometimes, late at night, he'd look at his son and remember a boy who'd died trying to come home, a boy who'd named children he'd never have, a boy who'd asked Frank to tell Sarah he tried. Frank kept his promise and lived the life Tommy never got to have. For both of them.